This is Territory Tales, the stories behind the fascinating people and amazing places here in Oregon's Mountain Hood Territory. I am your host, Jared Lyman, and I am ecstatic. I'm excited. I am vibrating with energy and geeking out completely because our guest today is somebody who is, I'd say, definitely a celebrity in my household and many households. And I think that I do know right now that my daughter is insanely jealous that I get to hang out with our guest. Molly Johnson, our co-host, why don't you introduce our guest so everybody can wonder who am I teasing here?
Okay, we are going to be speaking with Cliff Barackman, and he is the owner of the North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes.
And more than the North American Bigfoot Center, which, of course, we're going to talk about because I'm insanely excited about any new product in Mount Hood territory I get to promote, especially one that's in my neighborhood. But people may recognize your name. You are one of the principals behind the hit show Finding Bigfoot.
Yeah, I did Finding Bigfoot for the last 8 or 10 years. I was the evidence analyst, but really I've been doing Bigfoot stuff for 25 years. So, if you're part of the Bigfoot community or even tangentially aware of the subject, you probably have read some of my work at some point or another.
And here's the cool thing, because people don't realize this, but Clackamas County is Bigfoot country.
Absolutely. Clackamas County has the highest number of Bigfoot reports in Oregon. And of course, Oregon isn't number one in the sighting reports. I think Washington is, if I remember right, then California, then I think Oregon is number 3, if I remember correctly. But remember, to have a Bigfoot sighting, you have to have a Bigfoot, you have to have a person, and then somebody to report it to. Otherwise, it just kind of goes off into the ether and doesn't really get documented. In Oregon, we have the second highest number of forested acres out of all 50 states. So second only to Alaska. So
that's impressive, right? It
is impressive. Oregon is a very impressive state, which is part of the reason I choose to live here.
Right.
But there's also so few people here. I think the reason Washington has more Bigfoot reports is because there's so many people around Seattle. And there's a lot of Sasquatches there as well because the habitat is perfect. But all throughout Oregon, we have fantastic habitat, but so few people.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you're from Oregon. I mean, maybe not originally, but you actually, spent your formative years here because of the Bigfoot sighting and the Bigfoot history here.
I still think I'm in my formative years, honestly. I mean, but I grew up in Long Beach, California.
Okay. Not a whole lot of squatching going on there.
No. And actually, that's kind of what drove me out eventually. And it was a great place to grow up. I had a lot of musical opportunities and a lot of culture and all that sort of stuff. But there's also a lot of pavement and a lot of people in general.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started going into the more, Bigfooty sort of route in my life, as opposed to fishing and doing all the other stuff I was doing as a kid, ocean fishing and all that jazz, I found myself having to drive minimum 4 to 6 hours to get anywhere where Sasquatches are likely to be encountered. And so at that point I said, I got to get out of here. And so it took me a while to actually achieve escape velocity, but I did eventually have the good sense to get out. Not that I don't love Southern California for whatever it is, but it's just not for me anymore.
It's just not very squatchy.
No, it really isn't, no.
What was the defining instant, the defining moment that made you go, hey, there's something here. I want to devote my life to this?
Yeah, because that's a good question, because I've always been kind of weird, honestly. I've always been eccentric in my interests and that sort of thing. And I've kept a lot of very wide interests, especially in weird, paranormal-ish sort of things, although I don't really... Sasquatches aren't paranormal, don't get me wrong. But, UFOs and aliens and weird this and weird that and peculiar things, because I was born and raised in the 1970s. So I grew up watching In Search Of and all these sort of pseudo-documentary, spooky things, basically. And I loved that stuff. It always kept those interests in the back of my head. But it was when I was in college. I had a few-hour break in between classes. I'm way on the other side of campus, so I couldn't really go anywhere and stuff. So I'd figured, you know what? I'm at a learning institution. I'm going to go into the library and just for a couple hours a day have my lunch and then pick books off of the shelves and subjects that I was interested in, mostly the sciences. And then one day I stumbled across the anthropology section, and there was a book in there that was a collection of scholarly journals or journal articles written on Sasquatches. And I went, wait a minute, anthropologists are actually looking at this thing that I just kind of like blew off with aliens and ghosts and everything else. And I started reading through it, and I realized whoa, why is it? If these things are not real, why is it that literally every Native American tribe that lives in suitable habitat has something like a Sasquatch, like a big hairy giant thing that lives in the woods in their oral tradition?
Yeah.
How could that be true if these things aren't real?
There's just too many commonalities.
No, see, that's the whole thing. The evidence is there if you choose to look. And initially, it was running across that scientific book that turned my head and made me realize this isn't just stories. This isn't just people saying they saw something. There's actually physical evidence that is substantiated and corroborated by other physical evidence. It's congruent with one another. And the chance that this whole thing is nonsense based on the evidence is ridiculous. To me, I think the skeptics have a lot of explaining to do.
Well, and I get that because, there's a lot of people out there, if they can't see it, it doesn't exist. And I understand that mentality. But it's not unheard of for us as a society to discover something that even in today's day and age that we thought didn't exist.
Oh, of course. Whether we're talking about animals or fossil evidence for creatures we never knew about, or even entire civilizations.
Yeah.
All of these things are discovered. And to assume that we know everything that ever went on at this point or is still going on is ridiculous. It's hubris is what it is.
And I was thinking, because in reference to mountain gorillas, it wasn't that long ago that they thought those were a myth. And
Right.
now we know the truth.
Right. In fact, gorillas were reported all the way back to ancient Greece, as far as we know. Early explorers went down across Africa, like the western side of Africa, and they reported these hairy big man sort of things. And maybe they were talking about chimpanzees, but the general consensus is that they were talking about gorillas at the time. So you can go back hundreds, if not thousands of years and find traces of gorillas in literature. But yet, the lowland gorilla was discovered in approximately 1851 or something like that. You have to check my dates, but right in there within a couple years. And then the largest primate known to man right now, the mountain gorilla, was discovered in 1902, if I have my dates correct. And we didn't know about these things, but yet there they are.
Yeah. So how is it, and I'm asking this because I want, for the answer for the skeptics, but how is it possible that something where there are more people, and especially in a day and age when people really seem to be into the outdoors and everybody's got a bloody camera on them now with the phone, how is it that these things are still able to remain elusive? Is it that they're just more intelligent than, the mountain gorilla and they're, staying away, or is it there's just so few of them, or combination thereof?
It's a combination of a lot of factors. And number one on the list is their rarity. They are a very, very rare species. At my best guess at this point, there might be 300 or so in the state of Oregon.
Wow.
And to compare that with bears, there's about 35,000 bears.
And I still haven't seen any of those either.
Right. And, I'm out, I think it's safe to say I'm probably out in the woods a little bit more than your average person, right? And to this date, in Mount Hood National Forest, and I live right on the doorstep of Mount Hood National Forest, I have seen with my own eyes 2 bear in Mount Hood National Forest.
Seriously?
Yeah, I've seen a ton of them elsewhere, in the Sierras, California, et cetera, but only 2 in Mount Hood National Forest. And so if there's 100 times more bears than Bigfoots, I've got a long ways to go before I see a Bigfoot in Mount Hood National Forest.
See, I'm totally jealous. I lived for 5 years outside of Yosemite, still didn't see a bear.
No, you got to go to the valley, right?
I had one go through my trash, and I slept through it, but, it was right by my window, but whatever.
You slept through it?
I did. My dogs didn't, on the other hand. They didn't want to go outside for a week.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So what is it then about Oregon's habitat? What makes for a good Squatch habitat, I guess? What are they looking for? What do they need?
Well, one of the earliest things that was pointed out by a researcher named John Green back in the 1970s is a correlation between sighting reports and the amount of rainfall an area gets. Generally speaking, that's one of the patterns that stood out to him more than any other. 20 inches of rain is where you start getting a lot of Bigfoot reports, which makes sense, actually, because Sasquatches, you look at their anatomy in general, they're large, they're hairy, and those adaptations right there are designed to keep heat in. Okay, now the larger an animal is, the more heat retention they have. There's something called Bergman's rule in biology that says within a species of animal, let's say black bear, if the black bear that live in colder climates get larger body mass than the ones in warmer climates. So the black bears in British Columbia are going to be bigger than black bears in Mexico, for example, because...
Wait, they have black bears in Mexico?
Yeah, sure.
I did not know that either. All right,
Yeah.
see, I'm learning all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah, the mountains go right through the United States into Mexico. So, yeah, there are black bear in Mexico, for
Just
sure.
figured to be too warm. All right, cool.
Oh, yeah, no. But anyway, so the larger the body size, the more heat retention an animal has, because mass increases exponentially as opposed faster at least than surface area does, and the mass generates heat, surface area radiates it out to the environment, and so Sasquatches, being a large animal, retain their heat better, and they're covered with hair, and so they can live in these colder climates and not bat an eye. Of course, they like the wet, of course, because they're probably eating a lot of the plants that we see out here, and they also are eating the things that eat the plants, like deer and rabbits and mice and all those other things. And also it gives, because food, water, and cover are the 3 ingredients to life in general, or particularly animals. And the more rain you have, the more plants you have, the more blah, blah, blah. So that's one of the huge correlations right there.
So then are there rumored to be, Sasquatches down in things like the rainforest in South America as well?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've been to Brazil looking for these things.
Really?
Yeah. They call them the Mapinguari.
Okay.
And there's some discrepancy there because some of the footprint evidence that has been collected down there by Dr. David Oren indicates that it might be something else besides a Sasquatch. But I was down there speaking to the local native people and also just general, people live off the woods or whatever down there. The witnesses down there reported two distinct morphologies to me. One might be a giant ground sloth-like animal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we know that those existed in South America until relatively recently, just maybe a few thousand years ago.
Harlan's ground sloth in the Precambrian era, or not Precambrian, I'm sorry, the Paleolithic era, at the same time as the saber-toothed cats.
Yeah,
these things were like the size of a large bear.
Right. Oh, yeah, bigger actually.
Yeah.
Quite large, like almost the size of this wall over here. Very,
Wow.
very large animals. And the footprint evidence might indicate that is down there as well. But a number of the witnesses I spoke to who had observed these things out in the woods described them as monkeys without tails, about as big as we are.
So that sounds
That's
like
a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And they're not the 8-footers that we get up here, but think what I said about Bergman's rule.
Yeah.
It's a warmer climate. They're going to be smaller. And the same thing is true throughout the tropics of Southeast Asia as well. Yeah, that's the great thing about Sasquatches in general. Is like there's a lot of fantastic questions by skeptics out there. And skeptics are an important piece of the puzzle here because they're the ones who put these questions out. Where are the bones? How come this happens? Whatever. All those things. But since they're a perfectly normal species of mammal, all those perfectly great questions have perfectly normal answers.
I'm so sorry. Since I am not a skeptic.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
look
in
like
that-
you're a deer caught in the
I'm not
headlights
that,
over there.
but
I'm sorry,
I
but
feel like the two of you are having this amazing conversation, totally on the same wavelength, and I'm sitting here with eyes bright, just like, how did they know all of this information? I feel like I need to go back to college and read some of the books you were reading because this is a little over my head. But I'm not a skeptic, and so you're convincing me even more about all that there is.
No, people should be skeptical, honestly, because there's a tremendous amount of garbage out there online.
Okay.
Vast majority of the YouTube channels and websites are doing nothing but self-promoting, essentially.
Yeah.
They're not really spreading the knowledge that
Right.
most people would have to be equipped with to accept the reality of the species.
That's true.
But so you should be skeptical, and I would encourage you to be skeptical. Like be open-minded,
Yes.
but not so open-minded that your brain falls out.
I think I'm just right about there.
Well, I mean, we could honestly spend, hours talking about this, especially, I know you could, but I mean, I find the subject fascinating because if for no other reason, I would really hate to live in a world where we've discovered everything.
Yeah.
And there's not something fascinating out there that could just add this sense of mystery to life.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're in that boring of a place, well, that just stinks.
Yeah, that's something that Dr. Bob Pyle, a good friend of mine who lives up in Washington, he's a biologist. He studies butterflies. But he's also interested in the Sasquatch thing as well. And he says if we ever get to a point where human beings cannot imagine a giant hairy thing living out in the woods, then we've lost something even more important.
They could have just seen me without a shirt, but that's a whole other thing.
Ow.
Giant.
Oh, okay, we forgot about
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Well, warmer climate. I'm originally from a warmer climate.
There you go.
What is the suspected intelligence level of these things? Are they expected to be like on that same level of I saw a video recently of a chimp that was using Instagram on a phone, probably better than some humans I know. Mm-hmm. Do we think it's like that level of intelligence, which one of the reasons why they're able to stay hidden, or maybe a little less? What do researchers think on that?
I think it's greater than that. I don't think it equates to our own, but I also think that humans have a very species-centric perspective on what intelligence is.
Yes.
I
would agree with that.
Yeah, because we judge it by, we're smarter than them because we have culture and money and politics. But I mean, it's arguable that they're smarter for the same reasons.
For not having it.
for not having those things. But I think it's what we apply our brain power to. because we have symbolic thought, and that's really the main difference between humans and most of the other species of animals, is that we have symbolic thought. We can make these little noises with our mouth, and like tree, that means something to us beyond the word tree, beyond the sounds that it's me. And most of the other animals don't have that. That's the question: do Sasquatches have that? Because they don't seem they don't do some of the other sort of characteristically human things, like making and controlling fire. Although
that's a good thing.
Some hawks do that, I might point out.
Seriously,
yeah, they pick up burning embers and burn other areas to have to flush prey out. So
that is creepy.
It is, yeah, it is. Or tool manufacture and use is another big thing that we kind of claim as our own.
But chimps do that.
Chimps do that.
Yeah.
Crows do that.
Yes.
Sea otters do that. I mean, we're not that special when it comes down to it. The one thing we have going is symbolic thought.
And then we craft a logo, stamp a logo on there.
Right.
Craftsman there.
Exactly.
This tool.
Yeah. So that's the main difference there. So when I look back at like the human ancestry, the tree, basically the bush of life or whatever we're coming off of here, you go back to hominins, and hominin is a fancy word for human ancestors from the time that we split off from chimpanzees about 6 or 8 million years ago. So everything on our branch and all the offshoots that died off or are still living, in the case of the Sasquatch, are considered hominins. That's the fancy word for today. It's a vocabulary word.
Okay.
There'll be a test later. But
Write it down. You got to spell it.
But chimps are obviously very smart. We share 98.3 or something % of our DNA with them, et cetera. We're very closely related to chimps and bonobos in general. But these are even more closely related to us. Now, how much further they broke off from our family tree, we don't know. But I think the two big hints that I just talked about there, fire use and control and tool manufacture and use, are the clues. Because when you go back into the hominin family tree, the first species that we know for sure did those two things, Homo habilis. Homo habilis is a very archaic or early form of Homo, our genus. And so I think you have to look before that to find the ancestry of the Sasquatch. And that would give us clues to their intelligence level. And before Homo habilis, we had Australopithecines. The most famous Australopithecus is Lucy. You've probably heard about the Lucy fossil. She's an Australopithecus afarensis, I believe.
Yeah, found in a cave in Africa, if I remember right.
No, I don't think it was in a cave. No, it's a little bit different. But a lot of things have been found in caves since.
Okay.
You might be just confusing to couple. This is back in 1974.
Okay.
And they named her Lucy because you're listening to the Beatles at the time, Lucy.
And this guy with diamonds, yeah.
So anyway, turns out Australopithecines had two kind of big branches, a thin gracile form, which eventually led to us, and a more robust, sort of thick, stocky form called robust form, also called Paranthropus. So Australopithecus robustus is also Paranthropus robustus. And I think that's where Sasquatches are, because they had no evidence of tool use beyond just regular old, what chimpanzees do and all that sort of stuff, But the other Australopithecines might have. So I think that we're looking at Paranthropus, like maybe Paranthropus boisei or Paranthropus robustus or something like that, as a likely ancestor to Sasquatches. Now, to get back to the question, which is their intelligence level, well, we broke off from chimpanzees 6 to 8 million years ago. Paranthropus kind of popped in the scene maybe 2-3 million years ago, give or take a little bit. So that's half the time. Yeah. From here to there, that's half the time. We would expect them to be smarter than chimpanzees, more closely aligned to our form of intelligence in some ways. But how close? We don't know. They're not using math, they're not using fire or anything like that. But they're good at what they do, far better than we would ever be out there. Yeah. So I have to give them props for their intelligence level, but I think they just apply their considerable brain size to other applications.
Now, I think this is going to be a perfect segue. This has been fascinating, and again, I could talk about this for hours because there is so much I'm learning here, but people can learn about this firsthand at the attraction that you're currently building in Boring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're making the North American Bigfoot Center because you might imagine at my home I have a lot of Bigfoot stuff lying around.
One or two things.
I have, I think, the second largest footprint cast or impression collection in the world.
What?
Really?
Yeah, second only to Dr. Jeff Meldrum at Idaho State University. And really the reason Jeff has more is because whenever I get something he doesn't have, I give it to him.
Oh.
So because I work with academics like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and I'm lucky to call him a friend, and a colleague, essentially. And we talk about casts quite a bit, because there's one thing to have a cast, but what you can learn by looking at 30 casts is entirely different, because you can see the differences between them. You can start identifying individuals in the data set and where they appear over time, which is an extremely useful thing, and things that wildlife biologists use all the time with bears and mountain lions or whatever. Right. So anyway, I'm taking all of the data and all the information and all the knowledge that I've acquired over the last 25 years or so, and putting it on display in Boring, Oregon, right at Highway 212 and 26. It's kind of my giving back to the community in a way. You know, I've been very blessed in so many ways. Finding Bigfoot has brought me to 5 continents looking for Sasquatches or Sasquatch-like animals.
Wow.
Okay,
which 2 didn't you hit, other than Antarctica?
I did Antarctica and Africa. I never went to Africa, although Africa.
That's got to be a bucket list for you.
I would love to, and there's a tremendous number of local legends about these sorts of things all over the place. In Africa, and it makes perfect sense.
Well, yeah,
because really, what Sasquatches are, I'm not talking about the museum all of a sudden.
We'll get back there.
We'll get back to that. What Sasquatches are. See, we've kind of, we're all approximately with the same age within a decade or two. I imagine I'm probably the oldest in the room at 48 years old. But when I was growing up, there was no place for Bigfoot in anthropology. Okay, like when the Patterson-Gimlin film was taken in 1967, the scientists who looked at it said, such a thing cannot exist in nature. Look, it looks like a gorilla from the waist up and a human from the waist down. Such a mosaic of features cannot happen.
Have they never seen a platypus?
Well, that's just it. Platypus weren't believed either. In fact, when the first hide of a platypus came in, I forget what year that was, from Australia, they tried to show where it was sewn together, and it took several to actually prove it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't believe it, even though they were looking at it. And the Sasquatch is going to be very similar when it finally happens. But so in 67, they said, this cannot exist. Nature doesn't do this. And then go to 1974, when they pulled up the Lucy skeleton that I just mentioned earlier. And they said, look at this. It looks like a chimpanzee from the waist up and a human from the waist down. We've never seen such a thing. They said, well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's exactly what they said about the Sasquatch in 67. But the thing, back then, anthropologists were working under this idea called the one species hypothesis. And what that basically means is that, there is a species of animal like Homo heidelbergensis, one of our ancestors. Okay, it was on the scene for a while. Neanderthals came up and drove them to extinction. They outcompeted them. Okay. Then humans came and drove them to extinction and outcompeted them. We just did things better and drove them into extinction. Well, that was called the one species hypothesis, like a linear progression from one ancestor to another. That's not the way it is. That's not the way it was. And we didn't know that until like the late 1980s or early 1990s. And there has been a revolution in paleoanthropology since then. Now we know that it's not a linear progression like a tree trunk. It's a bush going out in all different directions. And this particular line went out and died off. And this particular line went off and died off. But
I know there's theories now that, there was even interbreeding between
absolutely
Homo erectus, us, and Neanderthal.
Yeah, and to say that 30 years ago, you would have been laughed out of a classroom.
Oh, yeah.
Because...
Well, just for saying Homo erectus. But,
well, sure, there's lots of opportunities like that. But you would have been laughed out of the classroom because anthropologists knew that couldn't happen because two species can't occupy the same ecological niche at the same time in the same environment. But now we know that's absolutely rubbish. Within the last 100,000 years, which is a blink of an eye geologically, right? Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years. We had Neanderthals around until 10,000 years ago. We had Homo denisovans around.
That was the other one I was thinking of.
That was found in a cave. We identified from DNA first, and we interbred with them. The Tibetans have, that's part of the reason they have such large lung capacities. They have that gene in them. We had Homo floresiensis, the hobbit species.
And that was the other one I was going to ask because that was just found in the early 2000s?
2004. There was one published within the last month from a different island in Indonesia, another smaller hobbit-like animal, critter at least, called Homo luzonensis from the Philippines. We had Homo erectus was around until less than 20,000 years ago. Homo erectus, less than when we were building the first cities, those things were in the woods outside.
Yeah.
We had the Homo naledi, the star child, or not the star child, but the star cave people from South Africa, a very archaic form. And Homo heidelbergensis was around 8 different species living that we know of. Living on the planet in the last 100,000 years. And at least 3 of those species were discovered in the last 20 years. How many more are there? How many more were there? And the question is, the real burning question is, how many are still alive today?
I think the real burning question is, how do you keep all of how do you know all of that?
I only have so much RAM, and I can't remember my address or phone number,
that
but
helps.
that's
Okay.
in there.
Okay.
I have
my
Bigfoot
God.
facts and then jingles from when I was 7 years old stored in the side
I
of my
feel
head.
better.
Why
I
can
feel
we
better.
never get rid of those?
I don't know.
I can't remember what I'm supposed to do at work, but by golly, I can remember some commercial I saw when
I
I
know.
was a
I'm trying to
kid.
flush my RAM because I have such a lousy memory, for things that aren't important,
Okay.
like addresses and social security numbers.
Oh, wow.
As much as I keep wanting to go about that, I do want to promote the museum
Yeah.
because, again, I'm really excited about this. So, what is the format of this? Because this is going to be kind of like this is something that the Bigfoot enthusiast is going to enjoy, but also something that somebody who's just curious and kind of wants to see what's going on, they'll be able to get something out of this as well.
Yeah, I view our customers as pretty much everybody. Yeah, the Bigfoot nerds like me are really going to love this, because I'm going to do some deep dives into stuff that they perhaps can't get anywhere else. They're going to be able to see the data that they've read about firsthand and even touch it in a lot of cases. Because a lot of that, you can look at a cast and you see some details, but actually by touching the cast, you even get more details. Like there's this wonderful knuckle print from the Blue Mountains of Washington-Oregon border over outside Walla Walla. And it looks great. The anatomy is all perfect, but when you run your fingers over the knuckles, and they're huge, you can actually feel the barbell-like shape to the ends of the phalanges.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you're able to do things like that in the museum. You're going to be able to listen to recordings of purported Sasquatch screams and vocalizations, some of which I've recorded and some of which will be donated to the museum. But I also want to address the skeptics too. My lead designer, a guy named Scott Minton is his name. We all call him Minty. I've got a lot of friends with unusual names, Bobo, Minty, etc. Right?
Bobo,
But,
he was a character.
yeah, so Minty is a fantastic graphic designer, and he's amazing. He's our secret weapon, really. He does ski patrol. That's one of his side jobs. He does that as well. He was up at ski patrol doing some training recently, and some guy was on a ski patrol who didn't know that he was involved in the museum said, "I heard they're opening a Bigfoot museum down in Boring. Can you believe that?" And everybody's like, and shh. and somebody says, "Hey, you think anyone's going to go to that?" And he goes, "Yeah, a bunch of stupid people."
Oh.
But no, that's great. That's great. Because what I find is that the higher level of skepticism somebody has, the lower level of information that they've been exposed to, right? So this is my opportunity. Those people can come in, maybe they decided the whole thing's nonsense before they step foot in the door. Maybe they're just going there because their son or daughter is interested in the subject and they've seen the show or something like that. But I don't think anyone's going to be able to walk out of the North American Bigfoot Center saying, this is complete nonsense. There's nothing to this whatsoever.
At the very least, they're going to be questioning.
Exactly. My job isn't to convince anybody. I don't care what other people think. I am completely satisfied that Sasquatches are a real animal. This is based not only on the evidence, which convinced me long before I ever saw one, but I have seen one. I've smelled them. I've tracked them. I've spoken to literally thousands of people who have claimed the same things, and they have absolutely nothing to gain and everything to lose.
Yeah.
But I want to show that, yeah, these things are there. I want to show the evidence so people can make up their own minds. Because people have not really been exposed to the evidence for the most part, especially the skeptics. If they had been exposed to the evidence and the context of the subject, I don't think any one of them would say it's impossible that anything is here at all. This is all nonsense. Every single one of those many tens of thousands of people who claim to have seen one of these things is either lying, on drugs, hallucinating, or crazy. Every single one of the 350, 400 footprint casts that are part of the data set had to be purposefully hoaxed, let alone the fact that they're internally congruent and they show non-human primate characteristics that are congruent with the other apes, but not with humans. Now, all of those had to be hoaxed and planted there. When you get to the level all this stuff is nonsense, it boggles the mind.
There's too much stuff for it all to have been fake.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. How is it? Okay, Southern California, right? There are these hairy man pictographs, life-size drawings by Native Americans depicting hairy man, 8.5 feet tall, that were drawn on the wall between 800 and 1,500 years ago. Okay, explain that, skeptics. Because you have to, what is it like? Okay, so the Algonquins in the Northeast and the people in the Thule Indian reservations in the South, they have the same stories about the same kinds of animals that predate white contact,
and they never interacted with each other.
No, like how did that happen? Did they get together and say, you know what, there's going to be this genocidal wave from Europe coming over, let's get ahead of this and play a trick on them? Like that's kind of the only
that's
alternative.
what they'll do to stop it. Yeah,
that's the only other alternative you got. And that doesn't make any sense, obviously. But yet, I've spoken to police officers. I know one guy that like he quit being a police officer because his fellow cops were making fun of him about him seeing one, and he wouldn't change his mind. There are politicians who have seen these things. There are
that may not be your best defense right there.
No. In fact, they won't admit it. They won't admit it now because
Right.
I've said who they are, and they're currently serving actually too. But we have other politicians that are interested in the subject. A friend of mine, Tim Burchett, he represents Knoxville, Tennessee. He just got elected to the House of Representatives.
Oh, wow.
So, and he's interested in the subject. And there's a quiet like little cadre of those folks who are. But because Bigfoot's fascinating. Bigfoot is kind of monkeying us in a way. We see ourselves in the mirror, I think, a little bit, and maybe perhaps something that we long for that we've lost. But I think that the museum is going to address all of these things. It's going to address the skeptics. It's going to address the children who come in, because you know what? Bigfoot might be proven today, for all we know. It might be proven next week. And these 8 and 10-year-olds who are coming in my door, that's a heavy responsibility for me. I was an elementary school teacher for 14 years before I got grabbed for TV.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm going to use my elementary school chops to address the children that come in and also their parents, because at the end of the day, what I've learned is that everybody's pretty much 10 years old deep down inside.
Oh, I straight up
right?
admit it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know the kids are going to enjoy pushing the buttons and hearing the vocalizations, and I bet when they go away, their mom or dad is going to go, yeah, I'm going to do this too.
Oh,
Again,
no, I'll be
push the
pushing my
buttons
kid
as
out of the
well.
way to do it myself.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'm going to address all kinds of people and all levels of skepticism or openness. And I think that's the goal. It's a chance for me to give back, raising awareness of the Bigfoot phenomenon where we live. And also, and this is a big thing too, you can't look at Bigfoots out of context. Right now, people are saying, what can we do to protect Bigfoots? Well, until they're proven as a real species, there's absolutely nothing we can do. But we can protect their environment. Mm-hmm. We can be good stewards of where they live. And where they live is basically public land. We own it. And that's important. I think that we can do things. We can take steps. We can go out and do trail maintenance for free. We can go plant trees. We can go perhaps discourage oil companies from drilling on our land. We can do things to discourage the abuse of the land that we own that they live on.
Yeah.
And I think that's something important too. We want to be good stewards of the land, and we can do stuff now to help Bigfoots, and it comes down to public land.
Well, I love that because
I'm leaving notes for myself. Forgive me.
we are, as an entity ourselves, we are very much so wanting to protect, leave no trace, protect all of our resources that are so important to keep for more than Bigfoot, but all of us.
Yeah, and really, what better spokesperson for Leave No Trace could there possibly be than a Sasquatch?
Okay, seriously, that was literally the note I just wrote down for myself right there, because that's something I'm going to work on now. So thank you for confirming that. Yeah, I appreciate you confirming that.
And if I were Smokey the Bear, I'd be quaking in my boots right now, because once Sasquatches are proven, I think Smokey's out of a job.
You know what? I just thought it. Celebrity death match: Smokey Bear versus Bigfoot. I would pay to see that one. I'm dating myself there. Most of my listeners probably don't even know that show.
Well, they had a Bigfoot versus Loch Ness Monster on it once.
Did they really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that one.
Out-nerded you.
Oh, man, I missed that episode.
But I mean, nothing personal, but it's probably going to be pretty easy for me to out-nerd you.
You know what? It's not every day that somebody can say that, and I'm pretty sure Molly is going to agree with that statement.
Yeah, this contest is getting real, guys.
That's a friendly contest.
Yes.
Well, talking about protecting the species, and I almost wonder if it's more than one species, because there's so many different places that they're found that you got to think there's going to be some diversity as they branched off.
Very, very likely.
But that said, what is it going to take to definitively get the world to say, yep, these things exist, short of somebody out there plugging one?
Short of that, nothing probably. In my opinion,
That's
it's going to take
thing.
a dead one. That is a sad thing.
Yeah.
And that's not something I'm willing to do. So therefore, I really don't advocate for proving the species, because I know it's going to take a dead one. And they've given me so much. I have a hard time, and I'm not a hunter to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, I fish and stuff because like they're a few steps removed. Like mammals, I can't really go. I can't kill them. You know, they're a little bit too close. You know, but realistically, I'm not naive about it. I think that it's going to take a dead one, unfortunately. Some scared hunter. Who shoots one finally and brings it in. That's the important thing. They have been shot before, but no one's brought anything in.
Yeah.
Or a trucker that hits one on the way to work in the morning or something like that. I think that's going to be the end of it all. And that's kind of where I'm positioning myself right now because I don't think discovery is going to be good for them. I think that they're going to be put under a microscope a little too harshly and poked and prodded and all that sort of stuff. So what I'm trying to do now in my everyday life, in my professional life, and with the museum, North American Bigfoot Center, is I'm trying to soften the blow of discovery because they are real. Discovery will happen. It's coming. And it's likely to be the worst thing that ever happened to them. So what can I do now to educate the public so they won't go out with torches and pitchforks after these things when they discover that they're living on Devil's Ridge outside of Sandy. Like they're there. They really are there. They've been seen at Dodge Park before. They've been seen at Oxbow Park on quite a few occasions. They're where we are. And I don't want people to necessarily be afraid of them.
I don't blame them. Dodge Park's beautiful. I
Oh, it
go
is.
out there a lot.
Yeah, Gordon Creek flows in on the opposite side, and that's the key to the Bigfoots there.
Oh,
but,
okay.
If you look at the gorilla thing, like my mom, I grew up in the 70s. My mom was born in 42 or something like that, 41, 42. And she grew up, well, when I was growing up, she would say, don't let the gorillas under the bed get you. But the gorillas were always the bad guy. The gorillas. And think about the movies that she was watching when she was a kid. King Kong and like all the the Abbott and Costello with the monsters. Like the gorillas were monsters to her, and it took a long time for that image to change with Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall and like their work on. I know that she did chimpanzees, but their work kind of showed that the primates aren't quite like that.
Yeah.
Although chimpanzees kind of are, they're kind of
They can be mean.
they're So I want, if I can get ahead of the curve and present Sasquatches in a more digestible way to the public, perhaps that would help them. Because really you only get one first impression in life, only one. So do we want that first impression of the Sasquatch on the public to be a bloody corpse on a slab, or would it be better for them if perhaps someone like myself or some other researcher or layperson got extended video of a female interacting with its young? What would be better for them? And that's kind of where I'm at this point.
And that's what the museum's supposed to do.
The museum is about educating, and fear is essentially a product of ignorance for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figure if I can educate the public on this and have fun doing it at the same time, and everybody enjoys the subject, that's going to do something good for them. I think Harry and the Hendersons, even though it was a kind of corny movie, as a kid movie, I think it did a lot for Bigfoots, to soften the blow of discovery. Depict them in an appropriate way, as opposed to these slasher movies that the Bigfoots are always out to get it, and there's the last girl and she gets away. Like the whole trope. My wife's a horror film freak, so and there's a formula, and like let's get away from that. Let's present them in a more interesting, more introspective, softer way, like they really are. Because clearly, they're potentially dangerous. Don't get me wrong; they're large animals.
But any animal is, if
a
frightened.
cow could be deadly, right? Like any animal is potentially dangerous. But if Bigfoots were out to get us, there'd be very few of us left.
I'd be more scared about seeing a spider than a Bigfoot.
Right.
Oh, he's terrified of spiders.
Well, me too.
Well,
Arachnids in general.
Yeah, you just intrigued me with just this conversation, and I've never even been to obviously the museum, but just now, and I actually have my first question. I didn't know if I would have a question. I thought Jared would be carrying this whole thing, but I do. So, aside from anyone shooting them, do you know how long they live just without anyone
We
doing
don't know
anything
for
to
sure.
them?
I do have some thoughts on that, though.
Okay.
It turns out all ape species, including humans, because essentially apes are our family. We're hominids is the term.
Okay.
African apes and humans are in the family called hominids.
Okay.
All apes, and orangutans too, they're not in our family, but we all lived about 40, 50 years in the wild.
Okay.
Before accidents or dental deaths get us. And a dental death is like you get a tooth infection and it spreads to your brain and kills you.
Okay.
Now, there's also another rule in biology, and the name escapes me at the moment, which is unfortunate. But there's another rule that the larger an animal is, the longer it lives.
Okay.
Now, if humans live 40 or 50 years, we'll just say 50 years. If humans live 50 years on average in the wild, although it's probably a little bit less than that. It doesn't take any stretch of the imagination. I think the Sasquatches might pull off 60 years every once in a while. Okay. And I have I know one witness, this woman who lives up in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. She saw a Sasquatch, I think, for the first time when she was 6 or 8 years old or something like that. Now she's in her mid-60s, okay? And she's lived in the same general area her entire life, backed up against this off-limits nature preserve area. And so and that's where the thing was. And she would see this same Sasquatch, over the years, periodically, like every 3 or 5, 8 years, she would see that. And she's confident it's the same one. And when she first saw this one, she feels it wasn't fully grown. She also admits that she was a little girl and maybe her observation skills weren't up. But she says it wasn't as big as it got later, you know. So
and you'd actually think it would be the opposite then, because she'd be a child. It would look larger than...
Right, yeah. But, you know, who knows? And maybe she's wrong.
Yeah.
Who knows? But this is the only data point I have. And I do try to base my speculations off of data, you know. And so she said the last time she saw this individual Sasquatch was something like 8 years ago. And 9 years ago. And that kind of jibes well with the timeline that I've set out for their possible lifespan. But I think it's safe to say, since every other ape species, including humans, lives about 40 or 50 years, that's probably their minimum. Okay. And of course, if there's 60 years, it doesn't seem outlandish to me, because they have no natural predators.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
I can't imagine something taking them down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's get into the nitty gritty about the museum. Where exactly is it again? What are the hours going to be? Admission and all those kind of things.
Well, basically, at this point, we're going to be opening incrementally. In June, we're opening the gift store and the information center. The information center is going to address the basic questions of Bigfoot. I'll call them Bigfoot 101. Okay, like what do you mean there's more than one of these things? Because a lot of people think that Bigfoot is an individual, and that individual is seen in California or Florida or wherever, and that guy gets around.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's got like some frequent flyer miles like nobody's business.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I go out of my way to say Bigfoots,
okay,
even though that's probably grammatically incorrect, just to drive it home that this is a species of animal. You know, because of course, if you think there's one individual that's been seen, since before white contact and now, it's ridiculous. No wonder they don't think these things are real, right? So the Bigfoot 101. So what do you mean there's more than one of these things? How long do they live? What kind of places do they like to live in? Where are the bones? That's sort of like, how come nobody talks about it or whatever. Those are Bigfoot 101, okay? And we'll have a number of fantastic displays addressing that. And at this stage in the game, we're going to charge practically nothing, like $3-4 probably, to go see those things in the gift store area. Okay, gift store obviously is free. And as the summer progresses, we're going to be opening up the exhibit hall in the back.
Okay.
And that's where the Bigfoot 201, 301, and 401 stuff, even upper level division classes, as far as I'm concerned. Like stuff that you can glean from the evidence itself, like the fat pad on the bottom of their foot. What are the characteristics of that? Okay. We know actually kind of a lot about the fat pad on the bottom of a Sasquatch's foot based on the footprint cast evidence.
Okay.
Yeah, we know a lot about the inner workings and the biomechanics of the foot based on the footprint cast evidence. Oh. We know a lot about the hand and how they don't have what's called a precision grip. They have a power grip. Their hands are very similar to humans and other great ape species, but with some notable significant differences that give us a little bit of insight about how they use their hands. And think about how we use our hands. That really gives a window into our behaviors, and that would be true of them as well. So in June, the gift store and information center is going to be open, and then as the summer progresses, we're going to be opening up the back incrementally. And I think that's where the real joy is going to be. And we're not going anywhere. We're going to stick this out as long as we possibly can. So over the years, actually, our plan right now is to have rotating exhibits every 4 to 6 months. Okay. So there's always something new and exciting happening. We're going to have guest lecturers come in, like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and give talks at night. We're going to be doing a lot of special events, basically. Awesome. And as we grow and as we mature as a facility, I think you're going to see spectacular things coming out of there.
Where can people go to find out what's going on, the latest information?
North American Bigfoot Center.com.
And you guys are on social channels as well?
Yeah, we have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well. Yeah.
So there's no reason not to know what's going on.
No. You'll know as much as I do.
But the kickoff is this coming June 2019.
Yeah. June 2019. We're opening up the very first baby steps of our project.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
So this is the surprise. I didn't tell you about this part. Here, now comes the dramatic music. We like to play a little game with all of our guests.
Okay.
And it actually gives us a little more insight into who the person actually is. And it's a lot of fun. And then also we just riff on it a little bit. But we like to play a game of Would You Rather.
Okay.
Molly curates 5 different questions for every guest of Would You Rather. We ask, and then you just first thing that comes to mind, and we'll play off it a little bit. But it's just a fun little way to give a little more insight behind each guest.
Okay.
So without further ado, Molly, would you rather?
All right, Cliff. Would you rather have a dragon or be a dragon?
And some of these questions are really random.
I would rather be a dragon.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because number one, clothing is a hassle. Okay? Second of all, I've always been drawn to layers like caves or deep forested areas and whatnot. Also, from being a Dungeons and Dragons nerd for most of my life, I understand the intelligence level of dragon far surpasses the average human. So I would like to do that.
See, you thought it was a random question, but it was actually
No,
a very pertinent question.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that was like one of the best thought answers we've had on any of
Yep.
these. It's almost like somebody leaked these questions to him prior.
No, actually, the thing is, my college degree is in jazz guitar. So I'm an improviser at heart.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Okay. So there's 5 questions for number 2. So, would you rather change the past or be able to see into the future?
I'd be satisfied with seeing into the present effectively, honestly. Yeah.
Okay.
The past is just like, it's already been there, and the future seems to be mostly hopes and fears, and I'd rather not address either one of those. So I'd be
Okay.
thrilled if I could just ground myself right here, right now.
That was deep.
And like yeah, I like that. Okay. So would you rather lose $1,000 or lose all of your phone contacts?
I think I'd rather lose my phone contacts.
Don't worry, I've still got your number saved on mine.
Yeah,
so
and
I
it's
didn't go
not so much that I value the money more, but I frankly, it's kind of like that RAM thing we were talking about earlier. Like my phone, is heavy with the weight of contacts. Like I can barely lift it some mornings, and it's just I can honestly go through my phone, and about a third of the people I don't know who they are.
That's what I'm saying. I'm with you. I feel like the people that love you, they'll still have your number. They'll contact you. Like, it's all
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of like my social media thing. Like, my Facebook page, I'm cruising along being Cliff or whatever. Then suddenly I get on television. And then my friends, quote unquote, it skyrocketed at like 36,000 or something right then.
Yeah.
And you're only allowed 5,000 friends, but when you turn into a page, like a public figure page as opposed to a personal profile or whatever most people have, you suddenly don't get an incoming line of garbage from other people. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't care about your political bent. I don't care what you had for breakfast. I don't care about all these things necessarily.
Right.
And I'm so thankful for it. A lot of people say, well, you can just make a fake one so you can follow your mother-in-law and everybody like that, people you love. And I go, well, no, I'm not missing anything.
Right.
No, so I kind of feel the same about my contacts in my phone.
Well, speaking of social media, that leads into my next question. Would you rather eat the same meal for the rest of your life or never use Instagram ever again?
Oh, I would rather eat the same meal for the rest of my life because I would do that anyway. Like if I could just have like burritos.
God.
I mean, look at my shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those who are
I'm a
listening,
burrito and taco fan in general, and burritos and tacos are kind of the same thing. In a lot of the ways, it's just the outside shell. And so I would choose to eat a burrito even if anyway.
you can tell he's originally a Southern California guy.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, for those that aren't watching and you are listening, he is wearing a collared shirt with pictures of burritos and tacos all over it.
Yeah. I'm a billboard for what I love.
Okay, and the last question is, would you rather be the worst player on the best team or the best player on a bad team?
Ouch.
Well, I've been both. Yeah, I've been both, and they're both, equally pleasant. See, the thing is, the team part is the problematic thing. For me, I don't care, and that's why I actually started playing guitar in the first place when I was 13 years old, because my friends would go out and play football and stuff, and I was always the worst member of the team, always. Last or second to last at kickball, the whole deal. And I realized what the secret was, or why I was like that, because I didn't care about winning. I just didn't care about being on top, who cares? And so I would just go have fun, and in some circumstances that actually makes me a better player than other people do. So I've actually done both of those things, but if I had to choose one or the other, I don't even like sports, Because the whole sports thing, I was told, hey, Cliff, there's this big football game on. You got to go check it out. I turned it on. No Bigfoots at all, right? I was confused. So, like... You like that? It's a time release joke. It's like a vitamin. But I'll equate it to the Bigfoot thing. I think I've done perhaps, this sounds arrogant maybe, but I've done perhaps a lot of some better work than a lot of other people have in Bigfoot. So maybe I'm one of the better players on that team. And because I don't think most Bigfooters do really good documentation or work or research or analysis. I think they go for experience. And so I find myself as being one of the better players on a team that isn't doing so well at the moment.
Okay.
So that's the only thing I can really equate it to, because clearly I'm not a sports guy.
Actually, I think that analogy works.
Yeah, I'm with it. Well, thank you for playing along.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
And thank you so much for coming on the show, Cliff. I mean, I truly do mean this. I was so excited to find out that this museum was coming and that you were involved. And you're such a down-to-earth guy, willing to come into this podcast. I truly appreciate it. And,
anytime, anything.
And I cannot wait for this museum. I can't wait to see it.
Fantastic. Well, come on in anytime.
Thank you for listening as well. This has been Territory Tales. Please, if you are only listening for the first time, go down, subscribe. You'll find us on iTunes, Spotify, Android, and of course on our SoundCloud account. Thank you for listening to Territory Tales.